Right. Welcome, everybody. This call today is going to be an open forum for you to share your ideas. Um, so to give you an idea of our agenda for the day, we'll do, as always, a little quick Zoom tutorial to remind people where to put their questions and comments and how to engage in the conversation. Cover a little bit of the ground rules that we'd like to adhere to while you're speaking. And I'll give a little bit of an update on the industry status as of today, and then we'll just dive right into an open discussion. So as I'm doing the tutorial, as I'm going through this agenda, feel free to go ahead and start typing in questions and answers. There's no specific topics we're looking to cover, just whatever you guys need and whatever you guys would like to say. Um, so when you're typing into the chat, you have the ability to select either all panelists or all panelists and attendees. So if you want to make sure your comments are seen by everybody in the group, just make sure you select all panelists and attendees. Any questions you have that you'd like someone to answer, feel free to type it in the Q&A box. People can type in questions. You can upvote questions for the more popular or the questions that need to be answered more immediately. If you see a question you want to answer verbally, what you can do is go ahead and raise your hand. So down at the lower middle of your screen, you'll see a raise hand button. As soon as you raise your hand, depending on how many people we have currently raising their hands, I'll go ahead and unmute you. You'll see a little pop-up that looks like this. Then you just click unmute myself and you'll be ready to talk. So feel free to share any stories you've had over the last several weeks, any ideas you've had that you think would be useful for other people in the group, or feel free to answer any of the questions that are being asked. Ground rules are the same as always. Just be polite and respectful of everybody, and panelists and CWA included. Keep any personal political commentary to a minimum, or preferably don't touch on those areas at all. And then when you are unmuted and after you raise your hand, I call on you, just limit your comments to about 2 minutes or so that everyone gets a chance to talk. Anyone who is abusive or in the chat or on verbally, we will remove them to keep the conversation flowing smoothly. Right now in the U.S., there's 48 states that have gyms closed at the moment. The two that don't have any closures do have climbing walls closed in universities, rec centers, fitness gyms, those kind of places. And 28 states so far have mandated gym closures. California is the hardest hit with 47 facilities reporting, 47 rock climbing gyms reporting closures. And there's a handful of states that just have one or two gyms currently closed. Oftentimes that's because they're states with fewer gyms. Around the world, I know this is a common question. If we have any international friends on the call, feel free to chime in on for your story. Around the world, a number of European countries have gym closures through the end of April, and some even further. And I think we'll see more of those around the world as this progresses. So with that, like little brief update, let's dive in. Some of the things we'd love to hear from you are how the pandemic has impacted your business plans, either opening plans, plans to expand, any impact at all. I see Kenneth has something to say, so I'll let you jump in and start with your comments, Kenneth. Kenneth Pack, everyone. And when you are ready to speak, you can just hit the unmute myself button. And please introduce yourself and say which gym you're coming from. That way people can kind of identify each other. Anything
I think I hit the button on accident.
All right, you're all set. Okay. Yeah, maybe we can hear a little bit from you, Wes, on some of the things you've been going through for the last few weeks.
Okay. When it comes to the first thing you're talking about with gyms open, we actually have 3.5 in the works, and we basically froze all work on those. We talked to our landlords and our partners, like our architects, to find good stopping points with them, and got to those as fast as we could, and then started negotiating how to freeze payment. The most important thing was to reach out to them. And I think right now one of the most important things you can do is realize that you're not alone. I think unlike other financial crises, we're all linked together in a circle, and it's really obvious that we are. So I think you'll find a lot of people who are in the same position as you are. Like our landlords are actually not big landowning conglomerates; they're individuals. So they have mortgage payments due. So we negotiate to pay them some, because if we don't pay a little bit, or work together to pay something, and they're going to be under distress. Now, obviously, financial circumstances have been changing from day to day almost. So when relief gets announced, you incorporate that into your thinking. But then almost the next thing you do when you hear about it is call these partners again and figure out, okay, now the circumstances have changed. How can we work together to take advantage of the help that's coming? But one thing we all realized, for example, is that this help, even though it's been passed, is still weeks or months away for your employees, for yourselves, for your business partners. So you have to realize that and incorporate that into your thinking. But the biggest thing we did with all of this growth funding that we had to open these gyms was to just say, okay, all of the plans we had for the rest of the year, we were using all of that to survive. And we'll figure this in a position to bring our employees back and try to operate the best we can. Some other things I touched on other calls or in the previous call that I was on, was the employees that you keep. Or in yourself as a gym owner, you might be feeling a lot of guilt. And if I'm freezing a lot, Garnet, I'll actually call in on my phone and take off the video. Maybe Heather wants to jump in for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I think that topic of guilt, survivor's guilt, and just the emotional toll that a lot of these difficult discussions that a lot of you are having with your staff and your business partners and your lenders and everything all happening at once is not something to be ignored or taken lightly. And one of the things I'd love to do on this call is see, how people are managing some of that stress for themselves. Any creative ideas that you've taken to just make sure you take care of yourself as much as you're trying to take care of your business and everyone else in your life at the same time. Um, does anyone out there have any creative solutions there, or any big challenges that you'd just like to share and get some advice about? Yeah, maybe you can give some tips on some things to pay attention to in those areas, Heather. All right. Um, well, let's try. I'm going to launch a little poll right now. One of the other things to consider here is just your general business plans. How long are you forecasting your closures might be lasting? So I'm going to surface a little poll, and then we'll share the results afterwards. And if anyone would like to speak about the way that they're planning around this crisis, yeah, please raise your hand, and we'll give you a chance to speak. And what we're looking for here is not so much how long you think the crisis is going to last, but what you were doing in your personal business planning, whether you're getting your cash flow projections all set for the next period of time, whatever that might be. And I don't believe at this time there's going to be anyone on this call with their gym currently open. But if there is, please feel free to raise your hand and kind of share your thoughts around doing that, whether you're open just to members or even if you're open with staff inside doing maintenance and other operational work. The ability to do that is very geographically dependent, but it'd be great to hear a variety of stories. All right. Okay, we've got about half of the people have completed this poll so far, and it looks like a lot of people are planning on 2 months. Does anyone have any specific types of planning that they'd like to share that they have found to be super helpful, whether it's different types of cash flow analysis or the way they're planning on handling their staff? A lot of this stuff is rapidly progressing, so it's hard to plan around. See if we can get, see any hands raised at the moment. Yeah. All right, Doug, welcome, and let's hear how your planning's been going. That'll be Doug Cosby.
Hey, Garrett, do you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Oh, good. Well, I don't know if it's, we're still in the early stages of planning, but I thought I'd share a few things and hoping for more answers from the group. We've been looking very carefully at the CARE Act that came out Friday and what might be available. I talked to my primary banker on Friday. No, I'm sorry, yesterday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. I think we're all having that problem. The PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, that's the program where you will reemploy all of your workers, pay them in full with money borrowed from a bank but guaranteed by the SBA. And that can be forgiven in full under certain circumstances. That sounds like that's going to be at least 2 weeks and maybe a month out from being available per conversations with our banker. So in the interim, we're going to go into a bit of a hibernation mode with employees and leverage some of the unemployment benefits. I also got a note from my SBA processor, and I hadn't heard anything about this yet, but they have a paragraph that I'll read. The CARES Act also contains a section that allows all SBA loans to be forgiven for 6 months, not deferred, but forgiven. The stimulus will pay all principal, interest, and fees on your SBA debt so you can continue to reduce principal over time. There's no information yet on how this will be implemented. So I'm curious if anybody has any more insight into the PPP. And also, this is the first time that I've heard of this SBA debt deferment program.
Yeah, I just included into the chat a link to an article that the CWA just published yesterday around the various SBA loan options, and a lot of this is rapidly evolving, especially with the CARES Act passing on Friday. I believe that the paragraph you're reading it is not referring to the SBA disaster loans. It's referring to the new the new rules around 7A loans, which just got instated with the passing of the CARES Act. So yes, underneath that act, there is a forgiveness, a full forgiveness clause in there. To my understanding, the main purpose of that act is to make sure as many full-time employees stay paid by the private companies rather than getting moved onto unemployment or any other social services. So most of the forgiveness, or well, all of the forgiveness that you would be allowed, and even the total loan amount that you would initially be entering into, are all based on formulas of your past payroll costs for the total loan amount. And for the forgiveness portion, they'll be based on the number, there's a multiplier based on the number of full-time employees you're able to keep on staff. Let's see. Yeah, if anyone's applied, I'd love to know if anyone's applied to any of the SBA programs so far and how that's been going for them. These new 7A loans obviously just launched on Friday, and I don't believe a lot of banks even have the paperwork to start them yet. I have heard that once they do have all of the application methods in place, they should actually be fairly quick loans to access and to fund. A lot of the rules have been cut out, so a lot of the other than like basic credit checks and things like that, some of the other more nuanced SBA rules are just kind of thrown out the window to get funds into people's hands as quickly as possible.
Hey, Garnet.
Yes.
We're already in the process of applying for some of these programs, and from our banker, the initial 7A paperwork is coming out today.
Oh, great.
They're getting it today. So Alice, my wife, who is the CEO, she's spending the afternoon working on that paperwork here. But this will go back to something I was trying to say earlier, which is relationships matter. There's going to be a lot of people applying these loans, and unfortunately, this is not like something that's really mechanical. The relationships that you have with your banker are going to be important to getting your application submitted. So the sooner you reach out to those people you have relationships with, I think the higher your chances are going to be to actually get this funding and get this funding faster.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent advice. Yeah, and again, it's important to make that distinction between the disaster loans and these new 7A loans. And I think you're exactly right, Wes, with the 7A loans. That's a very personal relationship between you and whoever that lender is. I just noticed, Doug, in the chat, you also referred to the paragraph you were reading as applying to existing SBA loans, and I think you're right there. It's a kind of unclear piece of the legislation to me, but I think you're correct in that the existing SBA loans, there is some potential for forgiveness depending on the area you're in and your circumstances. For you, Wes, or anyone else on the call, are you applying for a disaster loan and the new 7A loan for both of those vehicles?
You can apply for all of them, but I think the government is going to limit you to, practically probably going to limit you because you have an SBA lending cap. I don't know how many people are running up against the top of that based on how they're capitalized. But I think most of us, if you had a preference, you would go for the new 7A loan because it's got such good forgiveness terms. The disaster loan, you still have to pay back under its current terms. Mm-hmm. Whereas the new 7A loan, if you follow its rules about keeping your employees on, not cutting your payroll, all of that financing is forgivable. So it's basically the government, giving you money, whereas the disaster will require repayment.
Yeah. I know something in the chat as well, and then I've got Ryan queued up to talk also. One thing I was going to mention, just looking at the chat here, your part-time employees will matter for your total loan amount that you could potentially get. That formula is an average over the past 12 months of payroll, so that'll include every single piece of payroll that you're paying out over the last 12 months. For the forgiveness portion, it's only your full-time employees that are going to act as a multiplier. So, and also that period that you're looking at is going to be the 8 weeks that follow your loan origination date. So all highly technical stuff, and you guys should, talk to whoever your local expert is on that, whether it's your lender or one of your business partners or yourself. But yeah, one little point of clarification there. And then, yeah, let's hear from Ryan.
Yeah, I'm just going to weigh in quick on what Doug was talking about. I've had some time to dig into the PPE loan. This is Ryan with Escape Climbing. And like a lot of this stuff's coming out, it's an 880-page bill. But there is a provision in there for $10,000 that's more like a grant that can be applied to the disaster part. And the advice that we were given from our the lawyers that we were talking to is as it relates to the PPE loan, that it will just deduct from that amount. And so if as a gym you're able to max out the PPE forgiveness, then you don't necessarily need to piggyback onto that 10K provision. That's what I understand right now. And I think there's going to be a lot of strategy for the gyms on the 8 weeks on, it's one thing to get accepted, but for that 8 weeks of getting everything forgiven as far as the expenses that line up in that 8-week period. And so there's going to be a lot of strategy about when the gyms can open and making sure that everything's grouped in that period and that the loans don't start too early when you still have people laid off, and then also to make sure that you qualify for everything coming in. And so I think I just wanted to throw that out, is that the timing on this is going to be really important, and the strategy revolving around your gyms and when employees are coming back, and just to make sure everything, is done well and smart.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's a great piece of this to highlight. So that $10,000 is an advancement on any SBA disaster loans. And I think those funds are available fairly immediately as soon as you have a successful disaster loan application. So you can get those funds. That's probably the fastest amount of money that you'd be able to get through any of these SBA programs, depending on how the 7A process ends up working. And then yeah, so that
Hey,
$10,000. Yes.
I just wanted to say, to actually piggyback on what Ryan is saying. When it comes to the timing, this is again an important reason to reach out to your landlord, because how this loan funds will actually help you if you work with your landlord on how to pay your rent in a way that you are going to be forgiven for the funds that you take out, and you'll be able to pay your landlord with funds that will be forgiven, because this loan will allow for payment of some fixed expenses, including rent. So I just, I sound like a broken record, but I can't emphasize enough that like reaching out so that you're working together as a team with the people you work with to maximize what you can do with these funds is really important. And it'll strengthen the relationships you have going into the future. For example, I don't want to be Eeyore, but there's a chance that we have like a spike. We might not be over this, and in those situations, you want to have already started building those relationships in case things get stormy again in the fall, and we have a dip or something like that happens. You want to be ready with that kind of planning.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. Actually, and that's another great piece of this to highlight is the what those funds can be used for, right? So a lot of us are going directly to payroll since that's often the one of the biggest costs. But the funds for either PPP or disaster loans can be used for rent, mortgage if you own your building. Many of your debt obligations can also be included and you have those funds used for them, so that can be potentially forgiven as well. And then also any of the other ancillary costs around your property, so utilities are included in there as well. Just so people know. Let's see. Is there anyone else out there who's had an experience with this? I see I've got Stephanie Schultz raising her hand. I'm gonna unmute you. Let's see. So you can't quite hear you, Stephanie. I believe you are unmuted though. All right. Okay, so we'll move on. Let's see. So yeah, we've talked a lot about some of the direct SBA and issues and some of the financial areas here. Going back to this idea of how long are you planning on having your gym closed? So we had this poll. It looks like the majority of respondents are planning for a 2-month closure. What kind of planning are you putting in place for that? Do you have a plan for rehiring employees, for what you're going to do as what kind of marketing you're going to do as you begin to think about reopening in those 2 months? And are you planning just for a 2-month closure, or or for a complete? That's the financial impact that you're planning for, is just this 2-month period. I'd love to hear from some of you guys what you've been thinking about. All right, might kick this back to you again, Wes. Are you planning? I believe you're planning more around a 6-month timeline. Is that correct?
I mean, to go to your question, the 2 months is really what we're planning for to be fully closed. And the financial impact of what we're all going through, I think it's almost impossible to think that it's going to be 2 months. So we're preparing for there to be some degree of economic impact, probably for the rest of the year. And I also think it's unrealistic to think that when we do reopen, if we say 2 months, that it's just going to be the light switch flicking back on and things are going to go back to the way they are. I fully expect there to be some kind of like ramp in or ramp up. So we're preparing to open, operating under the assumption that we won't be able to have full capacity at our locations. So we're starting to think through what operations would look like if we're only allowed to have, you know, I don't know, say one of our facilities, the occupancy is 625. I sort of hypothesized that the easiest way for the government to limit capacity in public spaces would be to just limit you to a percentage of your occupancy under the building code. So if our Santa Ana location has an occupancy 625, let's say, you say, okay, everyone can open, but you're only allowed to open at 25% capacity. So if I'm only allowed to have 150 people in the building at a time, how do I run a gym this way? How do I make it financially viable to even make sense to open my doors? We're starting to run through scenarios like this because I think it's more likely that we're going to open this way than we are going to just be, okay, everyone's back to life as it was before.
Yeah. We've got a great question in the comments, which kind of adds is a good piggyback to that comment as well. Because you must be in the situation where you have a number of members who've chosen to stay on with you through the closure. What are you planning on doing to thank them once you are able to reopen? Just kind of piggyback off of what you said, it's probably unlikely that the week after you're back open, you can have a member appreciation event, for example.
I think that this actually goes in with what I was talking about. So if we're able to open with limited capacity, the people that stayed on with us are the people that are going to get the most access to the facility under those conditions. I think that's the greatest way to thank them. And for the people that were financially unable to, I mean, there's a lot of, I just think there's a lot of things to think through, and that's really all we can do right now is to think. But that would be one way we'd do it. Another way is to thank them now. To the extent that they're giving you some funds, I think it's not unreasonable to try to give them content or to give them small things that are meaningful. I don't think it's about the size. I think it's about the meaning of the gesture, because they know we're under stress. Because these people aren't giving to you expecting something back. I don't think that's the point. They're giving because they feel like you're part of the community. So as long as you treat them that way and the actions that you take are reflective of that and they're genuine, I think they'll understand. You're giving them that whatever you can, but they have to experience it as genuine. If it's just marketing overlay, then they're going to see right through that. Yeah. And it won't have been worth it to give them anything.
Are you tracking the members that are staying on with you specifically through this closure in any special way, putting a tag on them or putting them in a separate group, maintaining a database of those folks?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we use RGP, so I think it's pretty easy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, and if anyone out there wants to raise your hand and share some of the ways you've been tracking people or planning on thanking them, love to hear some extra thoughts as well. On the employee side of things, I know you've had to furlough a number of employees, Wes. Have you had any ongoing communication with your furloughed staff? Do daily check-ins, weekly check-ins, or do you have a date that you're planning on getting back in touch with them?
So here in California, we have to navigate the lines of a furlough pretty carefully, but meaning that the way or the channels in which we communicate them have to be separate than what we were communicating with them when they were working. But we have all of their personal email addresses and phone numbers. So we actually have the luxury of keeping on an HR staff member who's walking through, or we made the investment to do it, to walk them through all of the challenges of being on unemployment and getting through all of that paperwork. So as the legislation is changing, we are sending out emails to their personal accounts, providing those updates, and then making available our HR supervisor as a resource to them. Our employees are, I think everyone on the call would agree, your employees are probably the first part of your community, and it's important to keep those connections alive and as healthy as they can be. So maintaining regular contact is important.
Yeah, and not to bring this back into the financial side too quickly, but yes, with the 7A loans, the number of employees you have through June is going to end up acting as a multiplier for any loan forgiveness that could be coming. Do you plan on reinstating some of your full-time furloughed employees before that to help maximize the amount of forgiveness that you can realize?
I mean, I might be the wrong person to ask, because from what I've heard from other gym owners I've talked to, we've kept it relative to our size anyway. We've kept a lot of employees on,
Okay.
And we've kept all of our full-time employees on.
Oh.
So we have all of our full-time staff and some of our hourly part-time staff still on the payroll, like active payroll, doing work for us. So because we made that decision, we're not, I don't know whether we don't have any more full-time employees to bring back before or not.
Hey, Garnet, if I could jump in.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so it's Heather, and I'm in Canada. I run a university climbing wall. What I've been doing with my staff is making sure they're healthy and they're feeling that they still have some connection to the climbing community. I'm pretty fortunate here. Our provincial not-for-profit climbing group put out a couple of videos on rescue building, anchor system building, and things like that I can share with them, just to add a little, here's some information, and to build a bridge, because I think maintaining those connections and checking in with their health is the most important piece. And I would also say that you can offer them ideas on content that they can participate in to continue to grow their skills right now. So it may not be climbing specific, but it might be working with youth specific. There's a lot of free video content on YouTube. So if you have someone who can spend a little bit of time finding some resources to send them, it's a great way to maintain that bridge with your staff and even with your members.
All right. Yeah, I think that's great advice, and will really help on the backside of this. Once we all can start thinking about reopening and getting back to some normalcy, I think that would be a really meaningful connection to have been made between you and your staff. Looking at the questions here, people are curious about what everyone's planning on doing with their April membership dues. Whether you're going through any sort of opt-in, opt-out methods or any other strategies to navigate this. Does anyone out there have any thoughts they'd like to share around their membership communications and membership strategy? All right, well, let's come back to that one. And feel free to type an answer into the question and answer dialog box, or just raise your hand and we'll get your comment surfaced later. Here's another interesting one. We have someone who's planning on opening up a new wall and curious about whether they should think about setting the gym in anticipation of opening in maybe a month or two. There's probably a few people out there who had locations that were set to open between March 1st and June. So I'll throw a little poll, see how many people are in this camp. And it'd be great to hear from anyone who's working on their gym actively during the closures, whether that's cleaning, route setting, or any sort of operational improvements. And then also anyone who is opening up a new location. that was set to open during this time, how you've been deciding to navigate that. Let's see. Looks like answers are coming in. We have a few people with new locations opening. Anyone with those new locations opening? Would you like to raise your hand and kind of share what you're doing at the moment? All right. We'll get this poll going. Another part of that question that was asked is, how do you keep your staff and your gym safe and sanitary if you are planning on doing operations work while being closed? The CWA, we're working on opening up dialogues with different manufacturers and research partners to offer some good guidance. So I don't think this is going to be something that's coming really quickly, but just keep an eye on us, and we'll be giving you guys, guidance on how to navigate some of these cleanliness and safety issues. Right now, one of the best resources, as for most of these questions, is going to be the CDC and the WHO, and then OSHA has been doing a fair amount of publishing on their recommendations for how to deal with staff through the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, so it looks like we got a lot. Most people have answered this poll now, and looks like most people aren't in the situation where they're opening up a new gym at this time. But a significant proportion, around 20% of people, were planning on opening up a new location between March and June. Again, love to hear from any of you guys how you're navigating some of these issues, especially if you're a brand new location where you're looking at recruiting new members, and any strategies you might like to share, or any questions you might have for people. Feel free to raise your hand and ask that question. Let's see. Yeah, so I see a question in here about getting some more ideas for content to share with members and staff. On Tuesday, next Tuesday at this time, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we'll be having a webinar focusing specifically on membership communications and membership engagement strategies through a closure. We also have an article that was just published this week on our blog and in the Lines newsletter, circling around some of the ideas that you can start with, and we'll be publishing more information about that as well. It's definitely something I think we'll all be having to think about for the next number of weeks. But I'd love to hear from anyone out there who has an especially creative idea they'd like to share with the group. On one of our earlier calls, Wes, you had mentioned you're having some of your staff go through and actually call individual members and thank them and engage with them. Is that something that's still ongoing for you, or have you wrapped up that program?
No, actually, so it's taking longer than we thought, because I think the need for people to have some kind of social contact other than maybe their immediate family or household, for most of the people who are not working, and even for the people that are working, the need is even bigger than I imagined. The employees that we have called, and we've called about 750 members in the last 10 days, and that's much. We've had calls like we were planning to go 10 minutes, go for half an hour. I just have one example in particular to share. We called one of our members, one of our assistant gym managers, who's tasked with doing member calls, and it turned out to be an ER nurse, and she picked up on shift and said, "I really should not have picked up, but I need to talk to someone. Can I call you back?" And on her break, when she got one, she called back, and they talked for like 35 minutes. It was really emotional, really difficult. And if we talk about being communities of members, and that's not just lip service, now's the time for us to back that up. Our members need us just as much as we need them right now. And I think whatever you do now to provide that support we don't measure it in a quantitative or economic way, but it will come back to you. I even just think it's the right thing to do. And being on this call is one of the things that this is how I stay engaged or how I get through it. And I think reaching out to our members is a good way for everyone on this call and for the employees that you have to stay active, to have a purpose. And I think that will help us get through these kinds of times. So we're still doing it. I think it's going to take weeks. I thought it was going to take like a week and a half or 2 weeks. I think it's going to take a whole month to get through our whole member base.
I think you're right, Wes. I think there's a lot of people out there who are wanting to stay connected to their communities. Even if you don't know them personally, they have social groups that they climb with and climb within during your gym hours, and they're missing those people right now. And so any way that a gym could create a forum for those people to come together and meet each other, I think is super helpful for their mental and emotional health right now.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting comment too, because you never know. All of you guys have anywhere, some number of hundreds of members. You never know like how powerful your community could be for them, and it most likely is a really good spot. So, we are lucky to have these calls for us to call in and chat with each other. So some people might not be getting any support from their companies, from their friends, and making the climbing gym, or at least the online version of the climbing gym, one part of that community could be, potentially really life-changing for any one member that you might have. That would be a really, I think, interesting thing to experiment with, to whether it's calling one-on-one like Wes is doing, or even setting up a community call like this just for people to just relax and chat about climbing, home training options. You could end up making a really big impact on someone's life.
One of the big conversations that has been happening within the climbing community here in Nova Scotia is whether or not people should be climbing outside, and how many people at a particular area becomes too many people, and are people keeping their distances, and how are they coordinating not having too many people at the same crag. So I think it is important that there is some forum for the community to be able to chat and reconnect and discuss, because you do have some people who are not supporting the isolation or social distancing requirements from government, and being connected to a community can help reinforce those guidelines.
For those of you interested in doing some outreach like this, I wanted to make clear what we do. We do not ask for financial support on these calls. We reach out and say, hey, I work at Sender One. And we start off with people we know, and then we branch out into cold calling members that we might not know. And we just say, hey, we work at the climbing gym that you used to come to. We want to know how you're doing. And actually, that's something that the gym owners that I've been in contact, I make it a point either on text message or by phone when I talk to them to ask them, like, what's it like where you are? I am not, these are not like pseudo sales calls. It really is about connecting with people and finding out how they're doing, and letting them know how we're doing if they're curious. It has nothing to do with asking for their dues or asking for a donation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point in this. Yeah, it's all about that, about enforcing that idea of reinforcing that idea of community, and reminding people that this is their third place, to borrow that term.
Hey Wes, if I could ask, I'm not sure if you've answered this already, but are you guys using the opt-in approach or the opt-out approach for your dues?
We're using opt-in because it just seemed to match how we do things. So, but I was gonna, thanks for asking this again. The other thing we're doing is we're being as transparent as possible with what we are going to do with those dues. So in our communications, we've told them all of the April dues that that the members are giving us, even though we're not open, we're giving that to our furloughed employees. All, like every penny. So I think the more that you can communicate to your members what you're going to do with the April dues, I think the better response you're going to have. And I feel better sleeping at night knowing that I've told them what we're going to do with those funds. So if it's, I think Mesa Rim, I don't know if Ian's on this call or not, they said in their communications they're going to pay fixed costs and support their employees. So if you say that, then I think you'll find members, the ones that you want supportive, will be supportive, especially in the future. I think the worst thing we could do is ask for their support and prey on like misconceptions they might be having about it, because then you're going to be having to figure that out afterward. And I think it'll reflect poorly on us as small business owners. So to the extent that you can be transparent, I would be. So that's why we did opt-in. We felt opt-out was somewhat, disingenuous. Like you're hoping someone is ignoring. I know the psychology, so I speak to this as what we're doing. I don't, if you're in different financial circumstances and you need to do what you do to survive, I'm not going to criticize you for doing that. You do what you have to do. But for us, this is what we wanted to do. We did opt in, not opt out.
Yeah. Anyone out there who chose the opt-out approach would like to speak to their reasons for making that decision, or even just how people responded to the communication? You can just raise your hand at the lower part of your screen. All right, let's hear from Audrey. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I own Zenith Climbing Center in Springfield, Missouri, and we have done an opt-out approach, and we're just trying to be really communicative with our members about that. So we're doing a Facebook Live Q&A with the owners tonight just to answer any questions about that. And we have not laid off any employees or furloughed any employees, so we are paying our full staff right now, even though they're not able to work. So we just feel like that's the best thing for our gym and our employees right now. And so, yeah, we're doing free freezes, and we don't have a cancellation fee or anything like that. So people can cancel, they can freeze if they want to, but we are still going forward with billing on April 1st.
All right, thanks, Audrey. And I guess to share a similar issue that we at the CWA have faced, after we had to cancel the summit for this year, we did choose kind of a modified, I'd say, opt-out approach for people's conference registration fees. So to piggyback on what Audrey said, our plan is to be very communicative about that and issue reminders that you can get a refund for this. If you don't get a refund, your registration will be covered for next year. Just try to make it as friendly as possible, but also do have to keep in mind having a process that you can manage as well. Just whether it's the sheer volume of transactions you need to make or the types of communications that you have to have. So it's definitely something that affects a lot of different business types. I just put a poll on the screen about member calling or member community platforms, and we have a question in the question and answer box as well about what kind of tools people might be using for any of those kind of member engagements, whether it's Zoom like we're on right now, or a Facebook group, a local Facebook group perhaps. Anyone out there currently using any tools to have calls like this or one-on-one discussions with their members that they find particularly useful? All right. Let's see, another question here was back to new gyms that were unable to open in this period. So with our poll, about 20% responded. That was about 10 gyms, just for the number of people on this call, which is a fairly significant portion. I'd love to hear from any of the people in that situation, some of the unique challenges that you've had, see if there's any advice you'd like to ask from the group as well. You can just raise your hand right in that lower middle portion of your screen. All right, let's hear from you, Juan. And you should be unmuted and ready to talk if you'd like, Juan.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yep.
Hello? Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Juan. I'm calling from Colombia, Zona de Bloque Bouldering Gym. There's one thing we're organizing, and is this online screening of the Pretty Strong film, the Never Not Collective producing team allowed some of the organizers who had already like shows organized for this period of time to show an online screening. So right now I'm trying to figure out all the technical details for that. Well, I was trying actually Zoom to show the film by sharing my screen, because one of the requirements for they are putting is that we have to show the film in a specific date at a specific time, as if you were going somewhere to watch the film. So we were thinking in charging a little bit of money just to have some income, and then at the time, share my screen for everybody who paid. I think this is a very like creative way of making some income, other than asking members to pay. But I'm really like, I find that Zoom has like some trouble sometimes. It depends a lot of your internet connection quality. So I don't know if anybody knows any platform or some other way for us to do this, or is anybody else doing it? Probably there are some other gyms out there who are also planning on doing this.
Yeah, anyone out there with a similar idea? I'll say that yeah, it's something that we've looked at as a potential offering that the CWA could help get for you guys. I think one platform for that might be good to look at off the top of mind would be YouTube Live or Facebook Live, because you'd still be able to have a fairly real-time chat function, but you'd be decentralizing some of the technical load, so not everyone's going to need video for these kind of calls. I saw one person's hand go up. Did I miss you? If you'd like to, yep, Mason. Let's get your opinion on that.
Yeah. So I work for the university gym in Santa Barbara, and so we were originally planning on hosting Pretty Strong as well, and so we are doing the similar thing where we're showing it to our students this Saturday, and we did some testing in Zoom, and it was pretty clunky for sure. And so what we're switching to is our like university classroom thing, but I think it's a product of Moodle. So I'm not 100% sure how easy it is for people to get access to like a Moodle type account, and it seems to be working a little bit better. It just doesn't have the community aspect there. So we're going to also just host like a community Zoom so people can like interact with each other while watching on the Moodle base. One thing to keep in mind, I don't know if like how accurate this is, but based on our communication with Pretty Strong, they are now showing it themselves on Monday for 24 hours for $5, which has definitely kind of affected how we do pricing via the licensing fee that they did give us.
Right. All right. Thanks, Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, like I said, we have a webinar coming up on Tuesday that'll cover membership communications and engagement strategies. If we can, we'll try to touch on this specific topic in that webinar. Another little pitch, we did talk about the SBA quite a bit on this call. This Thursday at 10 a.m., so 2 days from now, we'll have 2 representatives from the SBA on to answer questions. Please be kind to them. All this stuff is developing so rapidly. I don't know if they'll have perfect answers for everything, but I'm sure that they'll have the best answers that we could get. We're at the top of the hour, so I think we'll wrap this up, and I'll let Laura cover just some of those upcoming webinars and other things that you can do to stay engaged.
Yeah, thanks, Garnet. So I think most of you have probably seen this slide a few times now, but we're going to be continuing to provide resources for the community about this situation as it develops. Encourage your friends and colleagues to stay informed with emails on social. Joining the upcoming community calls. As Garnet said, we're going to be covering more details on the SBA loan options on Thursday this week. Next Tuesday, we're going to focus on member engagement ideas. We've got a panel of folks who have been doing some really creative and interesting things who are going to be able to share their experiences, and we'll have some opportunity for you all to share your thoughts as well. So that's what we've got coming up. We're also continuing to work on advocacy. If you want to switch to the next slide, Garnet. So you've probably all seen at this point our petition, which was focused on last week's legislation. We are going to be updating that to kind of more broadly focus on the needs of the industry as we move forward. So that petition is going to continue to be relevant. If you would like to volunteer to help us with our advocacy efforts and this whole campaign, there's a sign-up form available at climbingwallindustry.org/volunteer. We're also looking for folks to share their information about how this situation has impacted them financially. That's going to help us as we do our advocacy work and communicate the economic impact to legislators. So that survey can be found at climbingwallindustry.org/impact-survey. And as always, we're available. Next slide, Garnet. Thank you. We're available to you guys if you have questions, any suggestions for resources you would like us to be working on. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you all so much for your participation on this call, and we'll see you next time on Thursday.